Native Instruments and IK Multimedia, two long-standing music production industry giants. And they both offer vast and very popular music software bundles. And I'm going to compare the two as meticulously as I can. So we're looking at Native Instruments Komplete and IK Multimedia's Total Studio. And here are 3 reasons why I want to compare them. First of all, to find out which bundle is better. Not only which one has the better quality, but also which one has the better value. Second question, if you own one or the other of these bundles, are you missing out on something? To a large part, one bundle can replace the other one, but maybe there are some things in Total Studio that you just don't get if you only have Komplete, or the other way around. And if you own either of these bundles, what even do you already own? These bundles are so huge that it's very easy to oversee or forget a random instrument buried somewhere. Through the comparison, you're going to get a concise overview of what you might already own. There are 3 relevant versions of both bundles, and on first view it might make sense to compare equal tiers. But if you look a bit closer, for example, at the pricing model, to me it gets obvious pretty quickly that there's a disparity. I would expect the Complete Collector's Edition, which sells for $1,800, to offer significantly more than Total Studio Max, which sells for the same price as Complete Standard, around $600. And if we look at the sale prices of these bundles, the choice gets even more obvious. I bought Complete Standard for about $300 and Total Studio Max for about $250, but you can actually find it for as low as $200. So I think the only fair comparison is between Complete Standard and Total Studio Max. If we take a closer look, it starts to make even more sense. Complete Standard comes with around 300 gigabytes of data, over 50,000 sounds. Meanwhile, Total Studio Max comes with a bit more of 480 gigabytes of data, but that's still significantly less than the next higher tier of Complete. You're going to see that both of these bundles offer things that are very comparable, but also some things are quite different. Both bundles come with a Flagship sampler, a vast collection of different sampled instruments in both cases. Both offer a large collection of synths, effects for mixing and mastering. But before we dive in, I have to tell you 2 things. I do not own the current version of either of these bundles, and I think that's fine. I would advise you too to not update every version. I own Complete 14 Standard and Total Studio Max 4, but I also have some new additions to the lineup like Pianoverse. And this video is only part 1 of what's probably going to be a long-running series. To be notified when part 2 drops, consider turning on the notifications. In the rest of this video, we're going to focus on drums and percussion. Let's start by looking at what I would consider the flagship acoustic drums that both of these bundles feature. First off, in Complete Standard, we have the Studio Drummer. These are kind of your bread and butter, pop and rock, deep sampled drums. And you have 3 kits in here: the Garage Kit, the Session Kit, and the Stadium Kit. And then we have Abbey Road 60s Drummer. This is a bit more specialized, but also maybe more interesting in some regards. Again, here you have 2 kits in this library. This here is the early kit, but then you also have the late kit, which I find a bit more useful. This late kit is a really nice dry kit, which I think is kind of getting back into style. Of course, for both of these libraries, you have many different presets as well, and you can adjust many different settings. You have mixer controls, built-in effects, even grooves. I guess I can select one here and then just drag and drop a MIDI file into my project if I want. This is what Native Instruments offers in terms of deep sampled acoustic drums. Now let's move on to IK Multimedia. They of course have their Modo Drum plugin. So we have 5 deep sampled drum kits on the Native Instruments side, and we have 13 kits that are on a comparable level just within Modo Drum. Interesting with this plugin is not the cymbals, but just the drums. They're actually not sample based, but they are physically modeled. So you get kind of interesting controls, like where should the right or the left drumstick hit. You can select the tip of the drumsticks. And you can do this kind of stuff with all different drum elements. If we go to customize, edit element, you get pretty interesting options to customize each kit piece. You also have grooves in here. that you can drag and drop just as easily as we had in Contact. You also have a mixer here, which is honestly a bit more sophisticated. Also, I forgot to mention, both of these plugins have multi-out capability, so you can route the different kit pieces to different tracks inside of your DAW. Now you can, for example, process just the snare drum output of this plugin. Also, both of these drums have something I find quite important, which is like samples for various different hi-hat openings. You see we have the closed shank, open shank, extra open shank, tip, open tip. Ooh, that's really cool. You can actually, on this C#, you can use the mod wheel to open and close the hi-hat. And in Native Instruments drums, you have just different samples you can trigger of the hi-hat getting progressively more and more open. You also have some nice, cool flams on the snare, rolls, which I don't think you have in Modo drum. So Native Instruments drums, very deeply sampled. Modo drum, in some cases it does feel a bit more polished, as for example with the mixer. More different effects that you can use. So which one is better? This stuff right here, the thing with the hi-hat I showed you, or also that you can really easily change the mapping of these things. Also, I think combined with the physical modeling aspect, Modo drum really deserves a point here. It also has more kits, but honestly, I still prefer the sound of Studio Drummer or Abbey Road 60s Drummer. But that's kind of subjective. For me, these are the most valuable drums in these bundles. But it's honestly only a tiny fraction of what I'm going to show you in this video. The first of 7 subcategories. The second one we're going to look at is stock acoustic drums. In the Contact factory selection, you have some acoustic drum kits in the subcategory band. These are honestly kind of pointless. Maybe they're good placeholders. You have a bunch of different styles in here. Maybe they're actually serviceable. I don't really see the appeal. I think in most cases you can get something better out of these other 2, 60s Drummer and Studio Drummer. Maybe what's interesting here is you have a different workflow with patterns. You have them mapped on the keyboard already. It looks more minimal than it is. Like, I think this also can do stuff like multi-out, see, controls over all the different kit pieces. It is just sold as a very bare bones kit visually. Let's move on to the stock drums you get in Sample Tank. We're just going to focus on this Sample Tank 4 folder to start with. Drums, select Acoustic, and currently I've loaded the Vintage Rock Kit. And you can see just from this keyboard layout how many samples are in this compared to this one. These are obviously way fewer samples. Also, this is like 2.6 gigabytes. An important button in Sample Tank 4 is this one right here. It gives you access to some useful macro controls. For example, quick adjustment between the levels of the different kit pieces, or increase the room mic. Yeah, you can go under the hood with this. You could select different sample groups, like just the hi-hat, and you can, for example, pitch it up or down. Honestly, I don't find this very intuitive or user-friendly. You also always have an effects rack in Sample Tank. And you might have thought that the Contact kit had something to offer that the Sample Tank one didn't, with the patterns, but you can actually also trigger loops in here. For example, with the built-in arpeggiator, you can just select a drum pattern, drag it onto your keyboard, or you can drag the MIDI pattern into your timeline as well. This arpeggiator is actually really powerful, and even with other instruments you'll see, it has some things to offer. So, stock acoustic drums, I think we have to give another point to IK Multimedia. The next category is what I'm calling Icon Collabs. Both brands have collabed with some big names to give you some interesting drum kits. For example, Native Instruments Butch Vig drums. These are some raw, kind of alternative grungy drums. A lot more lightweight, a lot less deeply sampled than the Flagship drums though. What I really don't like is that they didn't stick to the GM map, the general MIDI map. So usually this is a kick, this is a snare, this is a hi-hat, but here's laid out kind of in a different, reduced way. And these Play Series drums, they also focus on built-in grooves. And I can really see these being some good song starters. Another one they have is the Kareem Riggins drums. Let's quickly move over to IK Multimedia. In Sample Tank, they have these libraries. The Neil Peart drums, the Billy Coben drums, Terry Bozzio drums, Hugh Padgham drums. I'm not educated enough to know who all of these drummers are, but you can get their kits in here. Honestly, full disclosure, I don't really like any of these kits. I figure they might work well in some mixes, but just solo, I think they're a bit lacking. They're a bit boring. They don't give me anything, but they all come with loops as well. Maybe that's where the value in these Icon kits lies. One more contact library I want to feature here is 40's very own drums. So far we were talking about acoustic drums. Now we're slowly moving over to electronic drums, drum machines, samples. That's the category I called Icon Collabs. Let's move on to vintage drum machines. We're back in Native Instruments Contact Factory Library and we're in vintage drum machines. Let's go for a classic 808. For some reason, they like to put this dumb delay on all of these kits, but you can obviously turn it off. Again, you have built-in patterns. Let's hear another kit, drum tracks, DMX. Wow, this delay is so cool. Let's turn it off. Honestly, this is really useful to have all of these iconic drums in a pretty good quality, in a pretty nice package with multi-out, everything we saw so far. You have pretty much the same thing inside of Sample Tank though. They have an expansion called Beat Machines. Here you also have the 808 kit, for example. Ooh, actually this sounds a lot better. It's a lot louder though. Let's try to match the two 808s. Let's give it a bit more reverb. Yeah, drum machines sound so different. Maybe check out this video I did where I compared some drum machines. Both completely usable, just very different. And you have many other kits in here as well. They have like a weird naming scheme with everything. I would prefer more obvious names. That's kind of cute, but kind of annoying. But don't be fooled. These aren't all kits in the sense. You also have patches like this that are just all the snares. It's a nice workflow. And talking about workflow, of course you can load multiple libraries instead of Contact as well, right? But Sample Tank is really kind of useful workflow with loading multiple patches. I could, for example, just load the 606 hi-hats. And now we have them right here. And now I can load a second instrument, for example, the 808 snare. And we can add a kick. And we were able to really easily merge together a kit. So Flagship drums, point goes to IK. Stock drums, point goes to IK. Icon Collabs, point goes to Native Instruments. Vintage drums, I mean, just speaking from the sound, everything else is so comparable. I think I gotta give it to Sample Tank again. Let's move on to hybrid drums. This is a bit of a dumb category. I just saw that both bundles came with a comparable idea of layering sample and synth drums. I I here have a mix slider, acoustic drums, electronic drums. And then I can fade between the two. Aside from the category, I think Drum Lab is something you should also consider kind of a flagship acoustic drum. Some really good sounds in here. And in Sample Tank, you have something kind of comparable. The Expansion Bionic Drums does the same thing. Again, if you access the macros through this, you can fade between more synthetic sounds for your kit pieces or more acoustic sounds for your kit pieces. This is a bit of a pointless comparison, but I do think Drum Lab obviously takes the point. But if you own Sample Tank, Bionic drums are still worth checking out, I think. I think that's actually a fair point, small category, but it kind of balances out the fact that I prefer the sounds of these Contact kits too. Let's move on to percussion. Both of these libraries have a lot more percussion to offer than I initially thought. You have the Acoustic bank, again in the Contact Factory library, and here you have things like African shakers, with some patterns, bongos. If you hit the key of the loop, it actually takes the velocity into consideration. I was thinking this is a bit too static, but like let's just drag and drop this here, and then we could just make something like this. Boom. Ooh, that sounds great. Tabla. If you're not sure about the Contact Factory library, go check out the Acoustic bank. There's so many good things in there. Let's just have a quick look at Sample Tank 4. Select Sample Tank 4, select Percussion, and then we have many instruments right here, like this conga cajon. Let's just load a conga. And this is a bit of a workflow killer compared with Contact. Like you do have grooves in the arpeggiator, but you always have to go load them manually. They could just add more global presets where the instrument and the grooves get loaded simultaneously, but I didn't really find anything. But you can, for example, search for a conga groove. So see, Contact, Sample Tank, they're neck and neck. In some regards, Sample Tank has a worse workflow, and in other regards, Contact has a worse workflow. In this regard, definitely worse workflow here, but it does seem more deeply sampled again. Percussion, pandero. Tambourine, and it works. It's in here. Why isn't it ready? Why isn't it already there? But in Contact, you don't only have nice percussion in the Acoustic library, you also have these spotlight collections. For example, Cuba comes with some nice percussion. Or something like this. Or the Middle East library. Sounds great. And you have percussion in the West Africa library. I don't think IK can compete with this. But let's see what else we can find in Sample Tank. For example, salsa perc loops. You have the percussion kit. It's like chopped up. And you also have these loops. But you can really hear the time stretching here. Let's go to something. Useful, not as clean sounding because of some time stretching things. Don't underestimate Sample Tank 3's library. Some simple shaker. You have some nice percussion ensembles, and this is cowbells, clave, and woodblock. And you will actually find MIDI patterns specifically for cowbell, clave, and woodblocks, but you have to load them individually for some reason. So percussion, I think we give another point to Native Instruments. With the newest version of Komplete, this would be even a bigger landslide victory for Native Instruments because they added another, from the looks of it, very powerful percussion library to the collection, the Session Percussionist. So the point obviously goes to Native Instruments. And the last category for drums, I don't know if it's sensible to put all of these into the same bracket. This is just some miscellaneous things that I didn't find perfect matchups for, but they're also kind of electronic drums, loop-focused workflows, sample-focused workflows. For example, this very cool drum you can use in Reactor called Polyplex. Something cool is you can actually randomize this. You can find these sample types, acoustic. And here you can select different samples just with a slider. Or we can go to digital. Yeah, that's Polyplex. Definitely worth checking out. Next up, we have battery. And yeah, I think there's probably some of you out there that were screaming from the start, what about battery? What about battery? Battery is obviously a very powerful and popular drum plugin that comes with Komplete standard. But first of all, why is it so small? I think that's just how it is. And there's tons of expansions with more kits for battery that also come with Komplete standard. And for more modern productions, pop productions, EDM productions, trap, this is probably where you're going to spend a lot of your time. It has a pretty good editor. It's just a good drum sampler. I don't really like it though. First of all, it's too small and you can't resize it. And the browser, I think, is not amazing. Maybe I would use it through Komplete Control because Komplete Control has a way better browser. I don't care for it honestly, but it's definitely valuable if you want to use a drum sampler of this style. In Kontakt, you also have some drums in the synth category. We've seen many of these Kontakt libraries. They work the same as all the other ones, just with different samples. And yeah, it has some good sounds. And lastly, for Kontakt, you have Beats. It's also a bank in the Kontakt Factory library. It's a drum kit, but it also has some one-shot samples in there. And some patterns. I don't really like working with these, honestly. I thought I mentioned them. Maybe you didn't even realize that they're in the bundle. Now, what can IK Multimedia offer in kind of a similar vein? Let's start by looking at their electronica line. You see all of these sample tank expansions like Chill Out or Deep House. They only give you loops. I actually find this kind of fun, even though it's not something I would really use to start a song. That's what these electronica expansions do. And you get them in many different styles. Kind of fun. I also want to show you Sample Tank comes with some genre-specific hitmaker expansions, they call it. For example, the reggaeton expansion has drums. And you also have loops. And you have expansions like this for EDM, synthwave, trap. Of course, you also have many stock electronic kits. Let's just pick one. Something like this. A last one. I think it's pretty clear. Electronic loop samples, another point goes to Native Instruments. 1-0 for IK, 2-0, then it's 2-1 for IK, 3-1 for IK, 3-2 for IK, 3-3 even, and then 4 points to Native Instruments and 3 to IK Multimedia. I think that's fair, pretty even. IK Multimedia has some strengths, but to a large part because of packaging, in the end, Native Instruments takes the win for me. Thanks for watching. Click here to see part 2 and click over there to listen to my new EP.